After like a week of negotiation and hope upon hopes, Adam Thielen has returned to the Vikings. Ain't it sweet? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Today on the show, we got big news, everybody. Adam Thielen has returned to the Minnesota Vikings. We'll talk about compensation, what to expect, and some practice squad nuggets that I think are actually a lot more interesting than usual. The practice squad contains a couple of hidden little interesting side plots. So I'll get into those as well. But first, the big news. Adam Thielen is a Minnesota Viking once more. It sounds like it really was tough to pry him away from Carolina. When I first heard about this as an idea, I thought, nah, Carolina won't give him up. Or at least they won't do so, easily, right? You throw 2 first-round picks at him and it's different, right? But, they won't give him up for a compensation you'll feel good about. And I think we're kind of pushing that line. So let's start with the actual terms of the trade. The Vikings swap this year, or this draft, 2026, a 5th and a 7th. So they send a 5th, they get back a 7th. And then next year, they send a 4th and they get back a 5th. So I've seen a lot of people frame this trade as like the Vikings gave up a 4th and a 5th for Adam Thielen. It's patently untrue. They got back a 5th and a 7th as well. A 4-7 swap, you could call it, but that doesn't do the years right. It's a 5-7 swap and then a 4-5 swap the next season. How things go this year will also change that a lot. If the Vikings are good and the Panthers are bad, which if you go by the FanDuel odds, that's not a crazy outcome. Then, you might not even be moving down that many slots in the 2026 or in the 2027 draft when you do the 4th and 5th swap. If it's like that in 2026, right? That's not crazy. So I don't think like there's something to these day 3 swaps when it's 2 picks for 2 picks, that the value can only be so much in day 3. And if you look at the trade charts, if you punch this into all of the trade charts, there's a Hefe's Handiwork is the trade chart calculator that I often use when we talk about draft trades. All the different trade charts that have been concocted by everybody from Jimmy Johnson, who did the first one famously, to all the different like analytics organizations that have tried to quantify what it means to trade a 4th round pick for a 5th round pick. If you punch it into all of those, and depending on how you feel about where the Vikings and Panthers will land in those years and whether they're early or mid or late picks, the Vikings essentially paid a 5th round pick's worth of value. So that's, I think, the best way to frame it. It is a 5th round pick worth of value, give or take, depending on some assumptions you make and which trade chart you choose to use. And they just did it in this really weird piecemeal way, but it sounded like that's how it had to go. It sounded like the Panthers said 4th round pick. There were some reports that it was about like the money, and I'll get to the money. But the money worked out a lot easier than it sounds like the draft picks did. At least according to like Rappaport and Pelissero. So it sounded like the Panthers said 4th round pick. The Vikings did not have a 4th round pick. Their 4th round pick currently belongs to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they used it to obtain Cam Robinson. So they had to reach into another year to get a 4th round pick eventually. But in order to do that, in order to wait 2 years, the Panthers needed a little bit of extra value. That's basically what it sounded like there, where the Panthers said, okay, we'll take that deferred 4th round pick, but you got to move one of our 5ths up to next year or up to this year, right? And then as a sweetener, we get a 7th round pick in return. So that's, I think, more of the way the negotiation went down. As for the money, the Panthers don't take on any of the salary. However, as of this recording, the Vikings and Adam Thielen are in negotiations for Adam Thielen to take a reduced salary. He currently costs $7 million on the cap. He doesn't sound like he's going to be paid all of that $7 million. Yesterday, I addressed the notion, mostly this came from like Kevin Seifert's reporting, that the Vikings were potentially up against like a cash budget. There were two responses to that video, two different kinds of responses to that video. All of the comments fell into one of two categories. The first was people who did not watch the video and thought that I was complaining about the Vikings being out of cash, rather than disproving that and kind of showing that it is very much not true. And then people who were like, ha ha ha, who also didn't watch the video. So we can talk all we want about them. I know they're not watching because they don't watch the videos, but the people who were like, ha ha ha, Adam Thielen made you look so silly, when like it actually proves my point that the Vikings weren't really up to a cash budget. But I don't think it does a great job of proving my point, because that money would obviously have been earmarked, right? And so when they're making their roster cut down decisions, they have that money, you know, they have the understanding that they're going to be paying this much to Adam Thielen, whatever that number ends up being. And then they're up against their budget after accounting for that, which was like how you should be doing your accounting. So I don't know if that necessarily disproves the cash budget thing, but it's still just doesn't hold any water on its own. So we don't need the Thielen thing to disprove it. So I don't know what money he is going to make. He did knock Tim Jones off the roster. The Vikings released their practice squad. I'll get into it in more detail, but Tim Jones was on that list and is now no longer listed on the Vikings website on the 53-man roster. And then I think Andrew Kramer just straight up confirmed it via his reporting that Tim Jones had been released and brought to the practice squad instead. So now Adam Thielen is here in Minnesota, ready to take over for the first little bit. But the question is, you know, how good is Thielen at this stage in his career? He's turning 35 years old. And in a related question, was that compensation worth it? If we call it, they traded a fifth for Adam Thielen and then they paid him whatever they're going to pay him, is that compensation worth Adam Thielen? I find it really hard to argue no. I think it has to be a clear yes, because a fifth rounder in value, which is different from, you know, a bunch of pick swaps that equate to a fifth rounder, but basically sliding back on day 3 a couple times. That's what they did. Sliding back on day 3 a couple times is almost certainly not going to do more for the Vikings than what 1 year of Adam Thielen can do for the Vikings at this stage in his career, unless Thielen is so giga turbo washed that he sucks and he can't contribute to the offense at all, and then it was a bad trade, and you're definitely taking that risk. You know, they have a lot of data on how Thielen is aging. They can look at the last couple of years and see how Thielen played and probably be really satisfied with that. But you don't get any younger, so you have to assume that the next year you're going to look a little older than the year before, because that's how time works, unfortunately for all of us. And so you have to make that determination. But to me, thinking through what the compensation is, and Kwesi does these trades this way where it's like 3 picks for 3 picks and all this weird stuff, and you're pulling picks from 3 different years. And it makes it a little bit hard to parse out. And it's why you get weird stuff like, you know, that he can trade a 4th for a 6th and a player, and then you'll hear that he traded a 4th for the player. Like, no, he traded a 4-6 swap for the player. That's an incredibly different thing. So I just don't think they paid that much for Adam Thielen, even after Carolina kind of dug their heels in and got what they wanted. Good for them. They got a 5th to turn into a 4 in 2027. But that's just not really considered to be that big of a deal when you have to wait for 2 years for it to happen. And then you just swap 1 round on day 3. The real question is, what are we going to get out of Adam Thielen this year? He is going to be a very important part of the first 3 weeks of the Vikings. We also got a little bit of news about Jalen Naylor and how that wide receiver depth is looking. And so what is the offense going to become? And then even more interestingly, once Addison is back, how is this all going to work out? Because suddenly you got a whole bunch of mouths to feed, and I think in a very, very good way. That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Since the preseason is over, real football is happening. Hey, college football is also right around the corner. There even was a game in the Big 12 just last Saturday. For this weekend, PrizePicks is offering major max discounts on their weekly flyers. Avery Johnson who for over half of a passing yard, or Dak Prescott for over half of a passing yard when he plays his first game. They do this all the time, especially early in the season, and you have to put those squares in your lineup. You just have to, right? Like, they're total freebies, and they can turn negative EV plays into positive EV plays. And I think that's where PrizePicks gets kind of exploitable. They also have the flex play option, which is also super, super important. If one of your picks misses, but the rest of them are still good, you could still double your money or partial or like whatever. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. Moving along with the Locked On Vikings podcast, this is an interesting wide receiver room all of a sudden. We got a little bit of good news outside of the Adam Thielen thing, and then adding Adam Thielen to that room, and suddenly the concerns kind of wash away. We were looking like 3 days ago, we were like, is Lucky Jackson wide receiver 2? What's happening? He's on the practice squad, baby. He's not even here. And even the guy that kicked him off that was surprising, which is Tim Jones, is now also bumped off the roster. And the room makes a lot more sense now with Jefferson, Naylor, now Adam Thielen, Ty Felton, Miles Price. He gets the returner job. A little spooky, but okay. You had a bunch of great returns in the preseason. You at least earned a good chance at it. Although I'm still not above like a mid-season Brandon Powell if he starts muffing them. And then Addison returns week 3, and that's actually like a pretty exciting wide receiver room all of a sudden. So how does this work? And what is Adam Thielen's game? So here's what I want to like first start with. In 2023, Adam Thielen was a 1,000-yard receiver, kind of famously. He got 137 targets from the Carolina Panthers. Their offense ran through him. And he was very much on the same pace for the 10 games that he played in 2024. He got hurt. And I think when an older guy gets hurt, it feels older. Like, it feels like age is getting to him and his body can't handle the game anymore. And you know what? That might be real. That might be true. Hamstring injuries are tough, especially when you're older. It doesn't heal quite the same, and he misses 6 games off of it. And those things linger and stuff. And so there's no telling that won't like happen again. As long as he like survives the first 3 games, though, that's kind of all you need. And in the games that he played, Carolina's offense ran through him. He was the number 1A target. He did not get usurped by first-round draft picks until he was off the field with that hamstring injury. And then, Xavier Legette and Jonathan Mingo or whatever. I don't know what's going on in Carolina, to be honest with you. But then those guys kind of stepped up and became more, got a bigger target share. No, Chuba Hubbard. He was the next, good God. Chuba Hubbard and a tight end. Okay, man. They really like Jalen Coker, I guess. Whatever. I don't know what Carolina's doing. And I don't think that they should have let Adam Thielen go kind of at all. I don't think they should have picked up the phone on this, to be honest, which is why I'm excited about it from the Vikings perspective. I'm sorry, Dan Chisena got targets? Jesus. Okay. I got to click off of this page. So point being, extremely productive. And from everything I saw from his time in Carolina, like anytime I would like try to watch Bryce Young, right? He was winning the same way he always won. He would be very precise, very sudden. He has a lot of nuance. A lot of the tricks that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison used were Adam Thielen's first. And, Adam Thielen has had this like sprawling influence on the Vikings receiver room. You can go back to 2015 when Thielen was not that much older than Stephon Diggs, and they kind of learned some of these tricks together, how to stem a blaze out really far inside, and then how to turn that suddenly enough so you could really, really get a lot of separation on it. How to restack if you did have to go outside of your route stem to get around a defender because, he's big and physical and playing you tough. Those tricks and a lot of those route running things, like it's very well documented. Adam Thielen teaching a rookie Justin Jefferson those exact techniques, as much as Keenan McCardell has taught Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison or whatever. And then Justin Jefferson now imparting that stuff onto Jordan Addison. You can see the influence. You can see the way that Addison runs routes, and you can see the influence of through a couple of generations of like Diggs and Thielen back in 2015, which I think is unbelievably cool. But the reason I'm bringing all that up is because those tricks worked for Adam Thielen, who was an undrafted rookie out of Mankato State and wasn't exactly winning on 5-star athleticism. He's not a terrible athlete. He ran a 4.4. And he's like 6'2" and good size. Like he's not a horrible athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but that 1-star pedigree, right? Like you're not winning with athleticism in the NFL when you're coming out of Mankato State. He's good enough to survive, but you have to have a lot of technique and a lot of tricks. And that's how Adam Thielen has made an entire career, being a good route runner. And good route runner doesn't just mean crisp and, mechanically sound. It means creative. It means you're doing a lot of extra stuff, but also crucially getting to the spot when you are supposed to get to it. And if I had one critique of Adam Thielen, it's that he in some very well captured moments did not do that. You may remember the end of 2018, the Week 17 game against the Bears. The Vikings had a win and they couldn't beat the Bears. And that spat on the sideline between Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen, if you read Kirk Cousins' lips, he said, "I don't have 10 seconds." And if you look at the route in question, the thing that they were arguing about, Adam Thielen did a ton of extra stuff on the release, a ton of extra little like shuffle steps, and then went outside of and then tried to restack it. And he just took forever to run the route, and then it turned into a sack. So if there's one critique of him over the course of his career, that's not the only time stuff like that has happened. But obviously that was a much younger Adam Thielen. And for Bryce Young, this is the other thing. For a young quarterback, having that kind of outlet that is very experienced and makes things easy on the quarterback just by being where he is supposed to be, like where he's expected to be, when he's expected to be there. So you know that you're when you deliver the ball somewhere, you can trust that a receiver is going to show up the way he is supposed to. That really helps a young quarterback's confidence. And guess what? We got one of those too. The intrigue comes when Jordan Addison comes back from suspension. By the way, Jalen Nailor had a procedure on his hand about whatever he jammed or whatever. So he had a procedure on his hand and I'm getting like a questionable for game one kind of vibe where like they're targeting a week one return for him, but they can't guarantee it. So that makes sense. He's not on PUP or anything like that. He's not on an injured reserve return or he's not on any of those reserve lists. So he is potentially ready by week one or two. But now, obviously the sense of urgency is not quite there because Jefferson and Thielen make a pretty good duo if nobody else can play. You don't need to throw Ty Felton in before he is ready. By the way, I took a quick look. I was going to do a Patreon video, and then I kind of found it to not be as substantive as I thought because I thought I'd be repeating a lot of the draft stuff. But it's better. It's definitely like the pad jumping thing I talked about. If you remember that, if you don't remember that, you can go to patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL and watch a video, or you can go back and did a whole episode about it when he got drafted. But there was this issue where he would tip all of his routes, and it's a little bit more subtle. Corners can still read him like a book, but it's getting better, but it's going to be a process. And of course, he's a rookie, right? It's going to be a process. It would have really sucked if they had to throw him out there and have him get blanketed by tipping all of his routes all the time and then just play down a man because so many receivers are hurt. If Nailor is back by week one, you got Thielen. There's no ramp up period. He knows the offense. He's good to go. He's been in the league forever. Then you're good to go. And suddenly I feel way, way, way better about that wide receiver group. And when Addison comes back, Addison will clearly be wide receiver 2 again. I'd be super shocked if Adam Thielen was out snapping Addison. If anything, you would kind of want to be a little bit more careful and maybe workload manage him a little bit with just because he's the older guy in the room, right? And plus, Jordan Addison is just really freaking good. He has a great connection with J.J. McCarthy right now. Once he's back from the suspension, I think you're going to want him to hit the ground running. And obviously, this whole offense still runs through Justin Jefferson. So if you are a fantasy person and you're about to have your fantasy draft and you want to know what's up with this wide receiver room, it's still Justin Jefferson and everybody else when it comes to market share. It will always be Justin Jefferson and everybody else when it comes to market share. I would guess that by year's end, TJ Hawkinson would be second in targets and Jordan Addison would be third in targets. And I think Adam Thielen really eats into your weird flyers if you're a dynasty guy that really believed in Ty Felton or Jalen Nailor. Those are probably dead dreams now. But I think that the impact he has on Addison and Hawkinson is more just sort of squeezing the pie a little bit, just squeezing the market share a little bit more, not necessarily like usurping either of those guys. That would be my expectation. But hey, man, if Adam Thielen's putting up 100 yards a game and it's like 2018 again, like maybe you don't want to mess with that. I wouldn't either. But man, now I think of like week 4, you go to Dublin, you're playing the Steelers, and you trot out Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Adam Thielen, TJ Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones. It's like the God tier 2021 team, by the way, but it's also, that's still in 2025, that's a really good unit. That is an unbelievable skill core, and I'm super, super excited to watch them. The Vikings released their practice squad, their initial practice squad. I believe there's still one open slot on it if I counted right off the dome. But that there are some interesting subplots on that, so we will get into that next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you probably heard of like Viagra or Cialis. We're talking about that kind of treatment. And maybe you've even tried that kind of thing, but if you're looking for something else, something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. It's a next-gen prescription treatment that's trying to upgrade the whole process here. It's designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. And unlike the usual pill that can take hours and you have to like plan ahead, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours. So whenever the moment is right, you are ready, confident, and in control. So if traditional options haven't worked for you, you should join the over 150,000 men that have already made this switch. And you can even read real customer reviews on the site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. So if you want to join in on that, head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That is that's 60-1. Jesus. Look, FanDuel is safe, easy, secure. It's super clean to use. That number's crazy. You could find something with super short odds. You could find like a super heavily favored money line or something like that. And if your $5 bet you put on that wins, you get $300. You get 60-1 on something with super short odds. It's crazy. You got to go do it. If you are ready to play, download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Moving along with Locked On Vikings podcast. Hey, there is a survey in the show notes. I would love it if you checked out. The Vikings have signed 16 players to their practice squad. Only 15 of them count because of the international player exemption. So they actually do have another spot on their practice squad. But many of these are the usual suspects, the people you would expect. Basically the whole 2s and 3s that did make the team. Your Henry Birds, your Jay Sean Jones, your Lucky Jacksons, of course. But there were a lot of people who were like sweating some of those surprise cuts like Lucky Jackson, or maybe even Jay Sean Jones. And only 2 Vikings got claimed off of waivers, and they were Reddy Stewart and Dorian Mousey. Reddy Stewart, who has been in the league before, and he got claimed by Dallas, and Dorian Mousey ends up getting claimed in Tennessee, which is kind of funny because they cut Brian Asamoah and did not claim him. So they chose Dorian Mousey over Brian Asamoah. From everything I saw here, I think that they're insane for that. But, you don't get to the #1 overall pick as often as they do by making good decisions. Sorry, Tyler. Elsewhere on this practice squad, though, a lot of those guys that you're like, wow, that guy's super definitely going to get picked up, did not get picked up. Nobody else got claimed on waivers, and anybody else you wanted back on the practice squad, you got. Zemiah Vaughn, back on the practice squad, good to go. Taki Taimani, back on the practice squad. Gabriel Murphy, back on the practice squad. And that means that those guys can suit up, I think, 2 or 3 games before They have to be activated, put back on the active roster. And this is how you can kind of manufacture extra roster spots. Let's say you have Gabe Murphy and you suit him up all 3 of the first weeks. And I don't know, by week 3, somebody might be on IR. Somebody may be released. Somebody may have been traded away or something like that. Somebody might be on even just a short-term IR, and then you have another roster spot for a little, and then you can activate Gabe Murphy to the active roster. Or even if none of that happens, you activate Gabe Murphy to the roster in week 3, you let Chaz Chambliss go down to the practice squad again, and now he's on his 3 games, and you can have this same guy active if you want him on special teams, and it's a lot harder for him to get poached week 3 if you're trying to protect him from waivers. Which I don't think you are. I mean, honestly, if the Gabe Murphys and the Lucky Jacksons weren't getting claimed, I don't think Chaz Chambliss would have been claimed. I do genuinely think he made the team on the merit of his special teams more than his from scrimmage, and maybe on his versatility a little bit because he did drop into coverage a lot. They might like that, but I don't think he was very good at that. I actually think he was kind of really, really bad at that. So I don't think it's that. I really do think it's more about special teams for Chaz, but obviously, we'll see how they deploy everybody. So let me read out the list to you. Henry Bird, Dante Fleming, Khalif Halasi, Jonathan Harris, Lucky Jackson, Jay Sean Jones, Tim Jones, who made the initial 53 but wasn't on it, which, by the way, I am counting as a win for me. I predicted a trade TBD. I specifically said Adam Thielen or somebody else could be this guy, and I did not have Tim Jones on my initial 53. I am counting myself as right about that. Tim Jones being on the 53 for 16 hours does not make me wrong. Gabe Murphy, Bryson Nesbitt, Taki Taimani, Nick Vanette, Xavier Valade, which is actually a huge win for him to come into the organization in the middle of the preseason and play well enough to earn a practice squad slot is not easy. So good for him. And then Zamaya Vaughn, who I already mentioned. There are 2 other players I didn't mention there. I'm sorry, Vershawn Lee too. Now there are 2 more players I didn't mention there. One is Fabian Moreau. Hashtag old friend is back on the practice squad. That helps a little bit. I would bet anything Moreau is going to suit and be one of the game day elevations. I would guess it's Moreau and Murphy to start. I mean, something else could happen that wouldn't shock me. Some other special team guy. Maybe if you're worried about the run game, you elevate Taki Taimani too. He's a bigger body than most of the DTs that you have. So I think all those guys are going to be playing. I think they're going to suit up at some point. But Fabian Moreau helps a little bit more with the corner depth, obviously. So the Vikings have in their building 6 cornerbacks in the whole building. Usually you have 6 cornerbacks on your roster. They have 6 in the entire building. They have the 4 they rostered, Fabian Moreau and Zamaya Vaughn. A 7th if you want to count Tavier Thomas, but they very specifically moved him to safety to not play. Now, of those 6, 5 of them are exclusively outside corners that do not play the slot. Or if they do play the slot, it's because of emotion or something. You'll get 9 reps a year in the slot. The only one who isn't is Byron Murphy. So again, I still think that cornerback room is incomplete and something might happen. If Byron Murphy does get hurt, maybe their plan is to just kind of paper it over with safeties like Tavier Thomas or have Josh Metellus play it a lot more or have a lot more linebackers doing hook zones or something like that, just change with the personnel and just sort of try to recreate it in the aggregate. I am concerned about that. I think that makes you less multiple, and I think that just exposes you to one twisted ankle, making your defense kind of less good at the thing it's designed to be good at. And I think that's really that's risking too much impact on one injury. That's too many eggs in one basket. If you got to tear out a whole personnel package because Byron Murphy gets hurt, you should probably have a backup Byron Murphy. I remain critical of that. But Fabian Moreau who's also almost exclusively an outside corner, does join, and they are a lot deeper there now, right? If you don't like Isaiah Rodgers and Jeff Okudah, or say one of them gets hurt and Dwight McGlothern takes over, or Fabian Moreau takes over, or Zamaya Vaughn takes over, those are their backup options. And I'm not really excited about any of those names, but I think they suffice as backups. The last guy I haven't talked about on this practice squad is Max Percher. He's an offensive lineman from Italy, and Oscar Chapman is not in the organization. I think that might be a little surprising to people because it seemed to a lot of people like Oscar Chapman was pushing Ryan Wright a lot for the job. He was getting more holding reps. He was getting more run as the punter in the preseason, and in camp, people who were at camp thought that Oscar Chapman looked like a better punter. The banana punt and all that. But he bobbles a hold And I honestly, I don't think one bobbled hold is sufficient enough for you to be out of the organization entirely. I think that really does mean the Vikings went, okay, Ryan Wright wins this competition. But it was a real one. It was a real one. So Ryan Wright wins the competition. There is no longer another punter in the building. I mean, they got Oscar Chapman's number, but I don't even know if he stayed. He might be going to other teams and like going for other opportunities, right? Nope, doesn't look like it, but that might happen, right? Like he might end up on another team anyways, but if he doesn't, you got his phone number if Ryan Wright gets hurt or you do end up wanting to make a switch, halfway through the season because he sucks or whatever, that option is very much still available, but he is not in the organization anymore. Instead, Max Percher gets the international exception. He has been in the league since 2021. He's been in the NFL. Previously to that, he played for the Swarco Raiders. He is of Italian descent, and he is he started playing and developing football, this is from Wikipedia, for the Hildesheim Invaders Club in Germany. We love to see it. So there you go, an international kind of freebie practice squad guy that has been using these international pathway spots for many years on a bunch of different teams, the Rams, Lions, Seahawks, Commanders, and now the Vikings. And there you go. Now he is, I guess, on the Minnesota Vikings practice squad. With no waiver claims, the Vikings' initial 53 appears to be set. So I'm going to call that's how I did. I missed 5. That's on the high side for me, for guys to miss on the 53-man roster. 40 out of 53 is a mediocre year at best. So we'll try to get them better next time, but I was pretty stumped by this one, so I kind of expected that. But that doesn't mean that roster transactions are done. I still think that some kind of corner addition might be part of it. Maybe Fabian Moreau is that guy, and they just did it via the practice squad instead of the active roster. But I kind of still think that something is coming down the pipe. And obviously, we have other injury things to do. So here's the thing. There's only one more show this week, and next week is a preview week. We're previewing an actual game. We'll have a Twitter Tuesday. We'll have a crossover Thursday with Lauren. It's a Monday night football game, so we'll actually have an extra day. The Monday morning show will be an extra day to preview the Bears game, so we'll have all kinds of time to talk about that and to preview the season as a whole. So that's all coming down the pipe on Locked On Vikings. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.